Welcome back to look up here. Welcome back to Grace and Grief. I'm LaSandra, and this is
Hallie Hutchinson.
And she's just here. We want to introduce Hallie because Hallie is very interested in being a YouTuber, right, Hallie?
Mm-hmm.
And she has the personality for it. You know, she would do better with her consistency in her videos than myself. But you want to tell some type of fun fact about you?
Well, I'm 10 and I'm secretly 40 and I am my mother's guardian angel.
She is 10 going on 40. This is true. She has old soul, as we say. Anyway, Hallie, let's talk about these necklaces that we have.
Oh, these necklaces?
Mm-hmm.
So, as you can see, they look similar, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can see it, but mine says daughter, and then my mother's says mother, and then they make like a little heart when you put them together.
I can post a picture of this so you guys can really see it. But we got these about a week ago.
I think so.
Mm-hmm. And I had taken Hallie to the store and I said, to her that she could pick out any necklace or jewelry that she wanted, and then this was her choice. So I felt super loved that she would choose the mother-daughter necklaces. So thank you for that. Okay, Hallie, bye.
Bye.
Say goodbye. Okay. Don't knock all my stuff down.
Get out.
It just goes this way. Welcome back to Grace and Grief. I'm LaSandra, and if you are a new subscriber to this channel, welcome. Thank you for subscribing. If you've been here a while and been rocking a long time, welcome back. I started this channel 4 years ago, guys. It's been 4 years. My videos are not always monthly, weekly, what have you, but I come back and I check in with you guys about where I am on my journey after loss, here and there, periodically. And I reached the 4-year anniversary of Kenneth passing away on October 18th. So today is November 20. Let's see. Today is November 28th. So it's been a little bit over a month since I hit the 4-year anniversary. And so I just wanted to update you guys. I wanted to it's been a lot, it's been a journey, it's just been a journey. And there's so much that I want to say, but I also want everything to be said in a way that makes sense. So I just decided that I would just kind of talk a little bit about things that I learned in the past 4 years, because I always want to add value to the channel. If you haven't subscribed, be sure to subscribe today, and hit the bell so you get the notifications for the next videos. But if you're not following me also on Instagram, be sure to follow me at GraceandGrief. But I just wanted to come and check in. I hope that you guys are well. And I just want to kind of share where I'm at and some stuff that's been on my mind and things I've learned about grief and some things I wish I had known about grief. And so if you're interested in that topic, stick around. So I am in a place in my life at this time where I have come out of that feeling of everything being very chaotic. Like in the beginning, especially the first year when Kenneth passed away, everything felt chaotic. And so if you're watching this and you're like, look, that's where I'm at, everything feels like it's in an upheaval, grief is messy. um, Especially when you lose your spouse. So that is not abnormal. Um, is you're gonna be okay. Um, when Kenneth first passed away, we had been married, 13 years. We had 4 children. I often don't realize, like, I realized that I often did not understand how little they were at the time, but they were 6, 8, 10, and 11. And now that they're older, I look back and I'm thinking to myself, the kids were so young, I mean, just 6, 8, 10, and 11. Like, that was young, they were young. So for me to come into, now I'm going to be a single mom with kids so young, that was a lot. I don't even know how else to put it but to say that was a lot. And so I don't even know that I knew how much it was at the time. I just, you go in and you just do what you got to do. And you just rise to the occasion of what you got to do. But it was a lot. And so when my husband passed away, I had recently graduated from my master's program, so I hadn't even started working full time. So I didn't even know where I was going to work full time. I started the YouTube channel, but I wasn't 100% sure what Grace and Grief was going to be or where I was going with the YouTube channel. I was very much acting by faith from day to day, moment to moment. And just continuing to try to hold on to my faith. And I was continuing to speak faith and speak life over my life. But it was hard, and I wanna say, maybe I've said this on other videos, but I just want to say this because this may be your only video that you've ever seen of mine, or maybe you need to hear this again. God was faithful to me the whole time. God has been really faithful. Like, and it's like, what do you mean by that? I mean that I was still having my prayers answered. There were still like things that I desired to happen that came to pass. For example, I had always wanted to travel to South Africa. This may not mean anything to anybody, but it was a desire of my heart. I was planning a trip to go to South Africa with my husband in 2017. We were starting to plan a trip to go to Cape Town, and then he passed away before we could ever go. But while I was doing this work with Grace and Grief, I met some people who ended up planning a retreat in South Africa. I met a woman who's planning a retreat in South Africa, and then had met other people through my work with Grace and Grief who were going on that trip, encouraged me to go. The Lord blessed me. I had missed the deadline, but then someone dropped out at the last minute, so it opened the door for me to go. And I went to South Africa in 2019, a couple of years after my husband passed away, right when we were coming up on the 2nd-year anniversary. So this was like this desire, this huge desire, this dream come true that God did for me. And that's just one of many, many things. Oh God, I don't have the time to even explain it all, but that's just one of many things that were just beautiful, wonderful things that were important to me that God brought to pass since my husband passed away. Things where, it felt like there was no way for that to happen. And so I just want to share that with you. Let me say this, because I'm 7 minutes into this video. That wasn't even why I was making this video. I'm making this video because I'm trying to tell you guys some things that I learned about grief that I wish I had known. Here's the first thing. We always talk about the 5 stages of grief, right? But there are many different models of grief. That is the first thing. This is the first point I'm making. Because I am a real nerd at heart and I like to read and devour information, and I call myself, I'm a compulsive researcher. I was devouring lots of information about grief while I was grieving, which is when I would do my public speaking or, do podcast interviews or something like that, I would talk about, Grace and Grief is something where I'm standing at the intersection of faith and psychology. So I've been devouring information about psychology and about grief, but also about theology. So when I'm doing this work, I'm basically standing at the intersection. I'm talking out of the intersection of my theology and what I understand about psychology. I am not a therapist. I I just like to read and research. So, a lot of what I talk about, so when I say that the mission of Grace and Grief is to help people grow through grief and live boldly after loss, those ideas come from the things I've read and all the different stories that I've heard about how people have developed through loss and after loss. Some of it is like spiritual and theological, and some of it is very practical and scientific. And so my brain just merged these two concepts together. And so when I'm talking and writing, I'm talking from that place. I hope that that makes sense for you. But I wanted to talk about some of the models of grief, because everybody's grief is so different. I think it helps for you to understand that the way you look at it matters, and there are different ways to look at it. And so a lot of times when we are talking about grief, people automatically go to the 5 stages of grief. And so you may be familiar with the 5 stages of grief, which are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And so those are true. And so most of us are going to generally pass through all those stages, but not just one time. Usually pass through these stages. We may pass through them hundreds or thousands of times, and not in any particular order. As a matter of fact, you can hit every stage in one day, and do the whole thing again. And they're not in any order. They're not linear. It's an entangled mess. That's what grief is, just a messy, all over the place kind of thing, and or kind of experience. And so if you feel that way and you feel that it's messy and out of control and chaotic, that is really just what it is. It's how it feels. I have talked a lot about Christina Rasmussen's book, which was called Second First. And a lot of you guys that have followed the channel have let me know that you read it and you were also blessed by it. But there is another book that I do not know that I have mentioned, and I would be doing a disservice to you if I did not bring it up. And that is a book called How to Survive Your Grief by Susan Fuller. I read this one right as I was coming to the end of the first year. And when I tell you, this particular book, when I read Second First, I was at 6 months. That was 6 months after my husband passed. And that book gave me hope. It gave me like a renewed sense of expectation about my life. This idea that I could live an even better life than the life I had, that I could recreate a new and exciting life. That planted a lot of seeds in my heart about that. But this book, How to Survive Your Grief, I probably read that maybe like at 10 months or so after Kenneth passed away. This book brought me so much peace. It made so much sense out of what I had been feeling. The way she writes it, how can I put it? It's almost like your friend is talking to you. It's not jargon. It's like the lady across the street. It's just giving it to you straight. I mean, I love it. Honestly, it's not hard to understand. It's easy. You don't have to read it in any order, because the way she set it up, you can kind of flip around to what you want or what you need at the time. And she's just a straight shooter. She shoots from the hip. The way she writes just kind of hits you where you're at. I loved this book. And it brought me so much peace. It makes so much sense out of grief, and it literally calms you down. It just makes you feel like, okay, I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy. This is a whole thing that is normal. And it helps you locate where you're at. So I would say get this book, especially if you like to read, you like to look at different models of grief. You're someone that could get with that, or maybe you wouldn't normally do that, but you're just intrigued by what I'm saying. Get this book, Susan Fuller, How to Survive Your Grief. I got the Kindle version. Yeah, I wish I had mentioned this before, but let's not let another day pass where I don't mention that book. So go get that one. Okay, tell me what you think about it. Here's the thing that she talks about that I want to talk about today. So that's number one. There are different models of grief. Get that book, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about where I'm at as I'm reviewing the past 4 years, as I'm moving forward in my work with Grace and Grief. What I'm trying to, what I'm understanding and trying to convey is that grief is something that there's different types of grief. Things I wish I had known. If I had just kind of came into it early and knew this at the very beginning, I think it would have helped me. Both Susan Fuller and this website that I'm about to talk about today, and plenty of other people, talk about the beginning stages of grief, where the loss first happens, when you are really in that chaotic, like let's say the grief fog that people talk about, and you are, I'll just talk about myself, driving down the street and all of a sudden ambushed by grief and emotion to the point where you got to pull over on the side of the road and cry in the car, or crying in the aisles of Walmart and Target trying to shop and buy stuff, or crying at work, or just what did you do on Tuesday? I don't remember. What day is it? What is my name? When you just going through the thick of grief. They call that the acute or active grief. Acute or active grief. That's what that stage or that type of grief is called. You could look at it as a phase, a stage. But that's this. It's acute. It's intense. It's daily. It's all day. It's just there, and it's very much in the forefront of the heart and the mind. And this is kind of where you have kind of come out of the shock and denial. Now you're really dealing with the fact that this person is gone, and you're trying to accept the gravity of that. And you may be angry, guilt. I had a undercurrent of anger that was bad at least 2 years. And maybe anger is an overstatement. Maybe just call it agitation. I was very agitated for at least a couple years. To some extent, there was an edge on my personality where I didn't have a lot of patience. And I would probably, say things that I wouldn't normally say. If you're watching this video and you're the person that I went off on at the time, I'm so sorry. Mostly my family, would have been those people. But, I have had my moments. So some of you guys have asked me about that. And so I just want to make sure I touch on that. Yeah, that anger, that hot, almost like that's that acute grief. It's like you're just going through so much, and your patience is short and your fuse is short. It's a hard time. And there's a website called thelostfoundation.org. I'm reading from that, thelostfoundation.org. I'll put that link in the description. And this says that this acute grief is a response to loss it can be intense and all-encompassing, and it can involve an intense daily yearning to be reunited with the lost loved one. And people here can feel heart palpitations, butterflies in the stomach, frequent yawning, dizziness, fogginess, feelings of unreality, feeling distracted. having lots of thoughts of the deceased, trouble focusing, forgetfulness. And these are all adaptive reactions within the context of grief. And so that is a good description of that acute grief or active grief. In Susan Fuller's book, she talks about it as disorganization. Um, she talks about it as being a time where your life is just feels like it's in a chaotic upheaval. You got to deal with this. You got to deal with what the loss means to you. What are you, these feelings? She's saying, she talks about how there's a wisdom in grief. This is grief talk. Don't nobody understand this, but people, there is grief talk. I like to tell people there is grief talk. Don't nobody understand it if you ain't been through it. She says grief has like a wisdom. It's almost like it has its own, it's doing stuff that you haven't given it permission to do. It's taking you places you haven't agreed to go. But she said grief like has a wisdom to it, and it takes you on a little ride, and you can't ignore it. If you're shutting it down and ignoring it, you're going to stay there longer. She said, really, you got to go with the flow of it, ride the wave of it. And I tell people that, and it was hard. I told a friend of mine, I said, grief is like having a baby. It's like getting to the, right before you're about to have to give birth, and you almost feel like, how can I get out of this? Is there someone else that could like give birth to the baby besides me? And like, you're just trying to figure out, can they just put me to sleep and take the baby, while I'm under anesthesia? Like, you don't want to go through it, but you got to go through it, and no one can go through it for you. You got to go through it. That's what this part of grief is. Active acute grief is like, Lord, if this cup could just pass, but it can't. You have to really do the work of this in the sense of letting the painful things come up. If you got to cry it out, journal it out, talk to your counselor about how you're feeling, what you're thinking. You got to work with this part. And if you want to hear more about that, some of you guys are right there. And so if you want to hear more about that, or we should talk about that, or we should get together on a Zoom about that, let me know if you're interested in that. But that is acute and active grief. There's no one way to do it, and all of us are very different. It really depends on the relationship you have with the person that passed, other contexts and factors that are impacting your life. And so that's perfectly all right. Just however long you need to work through it. But just know that that part is something you're walking through. It's a temporary time. Susan Fuller talks about too, you're doing good as long as you're not stuck in one emotion. Like if you're just stuck in anger, you've been in anger a month. If you just stuck in guilt, you've been in guilt for 2-3 months. You're tormented, you're going into torment about something in particular, that is a time in that acute grief to really go out for help. Because, and I did get stuck sometimes in some of those negative emotions. And when I tell you, I got on the phone and started calling people like, hey man, I'm getting literally like hemmed up in the collar, by certain painful emotions, and I can't get out of it. I would call my friends, or I would tell my counselor, because I knew when you get stuck, you need some help, probably outside of yourself. So I would say, if that's going on, definitely reach out. If not, if you're just, I'm in painful emotion, but I'm moving through them, and I'm having little mini breakthrough moments here and there, but I'm moving through and I'm dealing with it through my journaling, through my outlets, just through crying it out, or friends or family or support or counseling, but I'm okay. Then okay, so that's that. Here's the part that I like to talk about, which I feel like we don't hear a lot about. There is also integrated grief. Susan Fuller calls that kind of grief resolution. So this is considered grief, but it's it's not acute grief. It's not active grief. And so this is on the lostfoundation.org says, this is the enduring residual form of grief in which the reality and meaning of the death are gradually understood and the bereaved are able to embark once again on pleasurable and satisfying relationships and activities. Integrated grief does not mean that individuals forget their loved one, miss them any less, or stop feeling sadness when they think about them. It just means that, and I love this, this may sound crazy, but this blessed me. It says that loss becomes integrated into the autobiographical memory system, meaning that thoughts or memories of the deceased are no longer as preoccupying or disabling. The individual finds a way of staying connected to the deceased without their physical presence. Once an individual's grief has become integrated, they're more easily able to engage in other activities without the grief constantly preoccupying their mind. However, there may still be periods where that acute grief pops up, like around anniversaries or birthdays. But it usually, or if you're under a lot of stress, but it doesn't linger or become overtaking. And so Susan Fuller, who calls that part, she calls that phase or that stage or that type of grief resolution. And I love some of the language she uses here because she says that at this point, the death becomes woven into the fabric of your life, not as something alien, but as a part of you and your life experience. And the memories of the person who died support your life rather than being painful reminders of what you lost. And the turmoil of grief recedes. So she talks about this as being a time where the relationship you have with the person that passed away becomes a relationship of the heart. And what I love about how the autobiographical memory, I'm probably not saying that right, but it's okay. When Kenneth first passed away, he was literally at the forefront of my mind. He wasn't here, but he was at the forefront of my mind, as if I had just talked to him, you know? Now, when I think of him, I smile. I don't break down. You know, in the beginning, it was like I thought of him and it felt like, but I just talked to him. You know, it was just different and it hurt. You know, the thoughts hurt. But now it's like, you know, it's like I think of him and I smile or I laugh, or maybe I do feel some sadness, but it's not debilitating sadness. It's not all encompassing sadness or something that's distracting me from enjoying my present life. It's just like like she said, it's interwoven into the fabric of my life that I am who I am because of him. I am who I am because of him. I got these kids because of him. A lot of parts of my character, um, my generosity, my desire to help, my desire to get over here and make this YouTube video at midnight, almost no 12:30, almost 1 a.m. because I know somebody's on the other side of this screen who needs this information. That type of laboring over people so that they can be better and that you can use what you have to bless somebody else, that came because he modeled that behavior in front of me. um and I saw him do it well, right? That this is because of him, right? And I can say that with so much pride and a full heart, and a gratitude, um, and not feel like I want to break down and cry. It makes me feel, I feel full, I feel alive, um, and I feel like yes, this happened, but I'm not in acute grief. You understand? I hope you understand me. I'm not in acute grief. I may be experiencing integrated grief, but integrated grief doesn't necessarily feel bad. It feels all right. It feels good. It feels okay. I want to say that because this on this channel is going to live all these videos where you guys are going to have be able to see me in all these different phases and stages. And it's important to be honest when you're hurting. It's important to be honest when you're in the thick of the hell of it all. But it's also important for me to come now and say, you get to there's another side. There is another side. And so let me just say this. Sometimes we feel like, you may hear me say that, you may be like, no, girl, you not, look, I'm not like you, or who your husband was to you is not, the same, or who your wife, or maybe you're grieving a parent or a child, or your divorce or loss of your health, or just something more that you feel like is greater than what I'm talking about. And that's like valid, because I think often we all feel like we're a special case. And all of that is valid. And you know what? You may be grieving something more. I don't know, what you're grieving, but I can let you know that my husband was more than just my husband. And when I say that, I want you to understand, as a teenager, he was a sibling. He was like a parent, because he was protective of me. He was watching out for me. We were just friends. I was dating other people, and he was checking on me, like, are you okay? Like, when I went to college, I didn't have a computer. I was typing my papers in his room, and he had my back. He was like everything to me. He was like my sibling, my parent, my friend, and then later became my spouse. So when he died, I felt the loss of like everything. I felt like this is the most intimate relationship that I had. I was closer to him than I had been my parents, my siblings, any cousin, any friend, anyone I had ever known. So when he died, I felt so alone and unknown, because there was a certain divide between me and other people. And so when I tell you, it cut deep. And that's not to make it, greater than your loss, but I just want you to know it hurt in a multifaceted way. And I had to learn how to just live my life without, this was like the person, I literally told God, I said I didn't even have anybody else. It's the only person I had. That's how I felt. And you let him die, that's how I felt. So I know that there are people watching this and you feel like that. You feel like that. And so I want you to know that I understand that, and that there is life even after that. There is joy. There is going to be a renewed something happen in your soul, in your relationships, in the landscape of your life. That is what God has done in my life. I have had to learn how to have relationship and more vulnerable relationship with other people besides him. And that's scary and hard and humbling. But God has allowed me to have that and create that. That feeling of loss of safety and protection and being known and being understood. God is restoring all of that. And he is so well able to do that. And those are things that can happen for you. And so I just want you to know that there is so much hope and life and good for you on the other side of this. We're at 34 minutes with this video. I had other stuff I wanted to say, but I'm going to save it. I hope that this was a blessing to you. Thank you for coming back to Grace and Grief. If you missed the Widow's Table Talk, we have a Widow's Table Talk series that we do, and we did one recently. We touched on a lot of good stuff. If you missed that, you can see the whole video on the Grace and Grief Facebook page. It was amazing. I want to thank you guys for watching. Be sure to subscribe to this channel, and I will see you next time.